Grab a cup of joe, buckle up, and let's embark on a journey of self-discovery, creativity, and entrepreneurship. Let's get rolling.
Welcome back, everybody, to this new episode of Rhythm of the Road podcast. I actually just got back from being on the road for 2 days, so I thought I would sit down and just give you some thoughts of what I experienced in the last couple days and what I really learned in the last couple days, although it was a conference for something very specific, and it was about HR and compliance and recruiting and laws and legal and all these kinds of things. But more than that, it had this networking aspect to it. Like, they gave you intentional times throughout the day and at the meals because they were plated and you sat around a round table. So you always were around a new group of folks with every meal. And the one or two people that I was there that we were kind of in proximity most of the couple days, we always tried to find different tables so that we were always introducing ourselves to a new group of people each and every time, which for some people is kind of uncomfortable. And honestly, for me, for a lot of years, it was also very uncomfortable. But what I learned through that uncomfortable is it's just, you have to get over it. And one of my favorite sayings to tell my kids is just build a bridge and get over it. So how many bridges do you want to build in a day? If you only want to build one, then life gets a little easier. If you want to build a bunch, then they can seem heavier, but it gives you an opportunity to keep learning and keep getting over those bridges. But what I've really figured out in those networking opportunities in the last couple of days was like, people just need to hear the things that you do. And mostly what they need to do is hear the things that you do simply without even thinking. The things that you're doing, like breathing, and how you do things, or how you run a business, or how you run a meeting. Like, how do you show up for your team? How do you run a meeting? How do you lead a group of people? How do you lead a group of people who don't want to be led? How do you motivate somebody in your executive team that, doesn't get along with one of your other executives? This is a conversation I had with someone. They have a consulting business, and they're talking about these two executive level folks who are really at the same level in terms of hierarchy and how the organization is set up. And so we just talked about, like, well, what are their strengths and where are they having issues, with each other? And do they need to be colliding all the time? Can they stay in their lanes? And that's a functional way to run the operation or run the organization. And she shared with me, this person I was chatting with, that, they actually ended up letting one of the folks go. But it was like this back and forth piece of who should they let go and who shouldn't they let go. And one of the things that I shared with her, along with a few others, is just like listening to find out who was actually the best fit for the organization. And that's something that I think about immediately all the time. Who's the best fit? Does this make sense? If you're hiring new folks or if you're recruiting new folks, like, who makes sense to have there? Do they fit with your culture? Do they fit with your core values? Do they fit with your mission? And if they don't fit, can they get in alignment with those things? And because not everybody has a perfect situation when they walk in the door, or even as you're recruiting or interviewing or having conversations, like, they might not fit immediately, but can they buy in? So then if they can get buy-in, then can they create alignment so that they can become part of the culture and really help to grow and push the team? And these are things that I just think about regularly, and I'm running in my daily life, or I'm running in coaching sessions and talking to clients and working with people all over the US. But some people, she's like, we didn't even get to that point. Like, we didn't even talk about some of those things. And I'm like, so it was almost like it was upside down. Like, we're worried about the hard skills. Like, can they do the tasks and make the checklist? And can they do this? And can they analyze in a nonprofit space, a statement of activities or a P&L or a balance sheet? And then can they correlate to that to how can we make the business organizational impactful? Like, we started talking about all those things. Like, those are like those hard skill pieces. But now then, what do we do with that information? And so these are some of the just simple things that I'm always thinking about. Like, the numbers are great, but what do we do with them? Where's the action that we take? And it seems so simple to me, but every time I continue to share kind of just some of these simple things that I'm thinking about on a regular basis, or I'm having conversations with folks about on a regular basis, those things come up and people are just like, they give me these wide open, like light bulb moments or deer in the headlights. Hopefully it's more the light bulb moment and less of the deer in the headlights, because I don't want them to be confused by it, but I want them to be thoughtful and process it, and what can they do with that so that they can take it back and they can think about that situation differently, or they can experience it differently. And one thing that I do to even enter into those conversations is I just listen. And sometimes I have to remind myself, like, I need to ask more questions along that way, because for me, the simplest thing to do is listen, because we have two ears and one mouth for a reason. I think we spent a whole podcast episode. So go ahead and go back into the archives of the Rhythm of the Road podcast. You might find one back there that talks about this specifically. But I just do that on a regular basis. Just that's the way I roll. And so sometimes people think that the simple idea of me always wanting to listen first always comes across as either like I'm shy, or I'm not paying attention, or I'm not invested. But really what I'm doing is I'm assessing, I'm listening, but I'm actually being intent in that listening space so that I can listen, so that I can hear what they're actually saying. And then I can formulate some sort of conversation after that. And so many times when we're in those moments, like, we'll listen and we're listening to respond, and we're not even allowing the processing to happen before we respond. We're already thinking of solutions or responses in our head, and they haven't even finished the conversation yet. So let those things play out, because we would have never got as deep as we did in the conversation I had with this individual had I not just given it some time to sit there. And as she's sharing this, and this is before I even found out what she did, then I just stopped and said, well, what is it that you do? So sometimes we just stop and ask some more questions, because it helps us to discover even more. And this is something that I just think is so simple, and what I do on a regular basis, that I forget that it can be really impactful. And not everybody does it out of the gate. Not everybody does it innately. Not everybody does it like breathing, like I do. And that's not good or bad. I'm just saying, if you have those skills, or you have those things that you're doing on a regular basis that you do not even think about, people need to hear what those things are, because those are pieces that might bring new clients into your space, that might help build that know, like, and trust factor for some of your ideal clients. And you might also give some insight to somebody that might help them with their day, with their situation, with their business, with their organization, with their family, with their friends, maybe they didn't even know they needed. And sometimes those are the most beautiful moments that I like to try to create, even though I may never know that that's the actual impact that I had, or the thing that got created, or the experience that was then had by that person. I might never hear from that person again. And some of you listening to it or watching this podcast might not ever reach out to me. You might not ever respond. You might not ever click the heart. You might not click the like or the share or any of those kinds of things. And that's okay. Because really, I want you to get something out of this message. I want you to get something out of it and take it and go do something with it. Hopefully it hits you somewhere, whether it hits you the head, whether it hits you in the heart, or whether it hits you in the ass. I mean, sometimes we need to hear those things too. And maybe that sounds awful, but at the same time, sometimes that's just what we need. There's been many times I've needed that, and I'm grateful for some folks in my life that are willing to do that. They're willing to step up to the plate and say, like, hey, what are we going to do better here? You need to be better. You need to do better. All right, how do we do that? How do I figure that out? What are those things? And then they just listen. If you have things that you're doing in your daily life, in your business, that you just don't even think of, they just roll off your tongue, or you just automatically do them, or whatever it is, share that with somebody. Now, whether you choose to share it on a platform like this, like a podcast, or you choose to share it as a image on a social media post, or go be a guest on a podcast and talk to somebody else about it and share it with them, because then you can reach even more and make a bigger impact. And it seems to me like so many people in the business and the leadership and the executive space, they really want to make that impact. So go out there and make your impact today. Share your simple, seamlessly simple things that you do every day, just like breathing, and make that impact for the rest of the world. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you. Thank you for watching if you're watching on YouTube. If you're not watching on YouTube, go over Rhythm of the Road podcast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button. We're still growing. We're on a great steady growth through 2024. Grateful for that. And I will see you all down the road.
Thanks for cruising with me on this episode of Rhythm of the Road. Remember, the journey itself is the destination. Until next time, keep the rhythm flowing, and we'll see you down the road.